Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Clinically Pressed. This is a roundtable discussion that we had been wanting to get into for a little while. There had been a bunch of background, which we'll get into in the episode, but we thought it was important to get this out. This is a direct follow-up to our clinical insight that we had from AJ just last week. So if you hadn't checked that one out, he gives a great 10-minute rundown on some of this information that we'll be covering in this discussion. We have guest host Erica Boland, Kyle's wife, for this episode. We are at the Boland's humble abode, recording a little late. Thankfully, all the kids, the boys, had been to bed and stayed there for us, so that made the episode go a little bit better. Also, we got to test out our new headsets, and I'll tell you, I think it's well worth it, and we'll give a better audio quality to all of you. So what we covered in this one is we talked about the evidence-based practice idea and then the continuum that could follow. And what does that all mean? Is it going too far one direction or the other if we go strictly evidence-based? And from that, we also dived into not just going for anything and everything that is sold to us. And that we kind of wrapped around to the old-time snake oil salesman, where it used to fix everything. And so within that, we started really trying to get into, is there a right answer? Is there something that makes sense that works for everything? We think it was a good discussion. We think we got a lot of things that could help you try and wade through some of the stuff that's out there, because it can be overwhelming and really confusing from time to time. With that, if you could please subscribe to us on iTunes, there's a link in the show notes. It'll take you right to the page. Also on YouTube would be huge. We'd really appreciate it. Helps us just continue to keep this thing going. Helps you get the information faster, which is always beneficial to you guys. And with that, also check out one of our sponsors, which we did vet, and partners, Paragon Fitness and Nutrition. They do some amazing stuff, and the science behind it is great. We have an episode with them, episode 44, well worth checking out, to hearing their kind of background on everything that they do. So that is well worth checking out as well. We really are big on their flame off right now after a long trip overseas. For me, that made a huge difference in just letting my body recover and get back to what I needed to do. Plus, Erica actually took a bunch of it before the episode as she was kind of battling through an injury, and it seemed to be helping her get going again. So check that out. Paragon Fitness and Nutrition, paragonfn.com. Flame off, use promo code CP15 for 15% off at checkout. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Also, just heads up, there is a couple swear words in this one, so please be careful who you're listening around. Shall we get started?
Let's do this.
Awesome. So, welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are first and new time on the new headsets, so we'll see how that goes with our multiple audio setups. Sorry, it's late. We're out at Kyle and Erica's, and we are going to talk about, I call this one From Evidence-Based Practice to Snake Oil and pretty much everything in between, and where all that falls and what makes sense and what doesn't. A lot of this stems from, you see a lot out there, especially with the world of social media today. What's the newest fad or the newest certification, so on and so forth. But then after listening to some other people and just working in academia, the strong push for evidence-based practice, which I was against because I called it evidence-influenced, and then I had actually never heard of the evidence-based continuum, which I thought was really interesting. That was a new one, but kind of put it into light for me, and we can dive into that if we want. And yeah, just where it all fits and how that all works, and we'll go from there. So
it's a lot to cover.
Go from that. Yeah. Go ahead and start.
I think let's get into that continuum. Could you explain that?
Crap, I hope I wrote it down. Yep, yes, I did. Because, yeah, I didn't like evidence-based practice because to me, with that, it's like, okay, what's in the research? Well, and I just always use this IT band example is one study showed you got to strengthen up the lateral hip muscles, the abductors. That's going to help with hip control. In theory, takes some stress off the knee from iliotibial band stuff. That's a whole other thing we could go into. We'll save it for another day. But then you go and you read another article that did hip exercises, and you get the results of that, and it says, doesn't work, pointless, don't waste your time. Well, if I go by that theory, what should I do? Is just sit there and look at the person, like, and hope that they get better? Like, am I not supposed to do anything? And so that's where I heard somebody say, evidence influence practice, and using the evidence to help guide you in what you're doing or solidify, validate, whatever word you want for it. But then it was actually at the dry needling course where he brought up this evidence-based continuum, which is utilizing the best research evidence that's available, your clinical expertise, they talked about being different than experience, which I would agree with, and then also the patient's values and preferences. Because I think, again, with everything, the evidence can show it works, but if they don't think it does, doesn't stand a chance. Instantly, you're already at a loss. So to me, that was just like, yep, that's the full encompassing thing, and to me, it kind of coordinates with that evidence influence and puts all the rest of it together.
Kind of takes the best of every perspective in all three worlds. I like it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Done.
I mean, it makes
Episode
sense.
over.
Yeah. It's the patient has so much of a role in the outcomes. I think that it's hard to respect that as much with just hard evidence, depending on where they are in their life during the treatment. And like you said, like if they think it's going to work or if they don't, if they're ready to make change or if they're not. And then if they can afford, I mean, their financial situation also plays a role in that too. So yeah, I would say I was more with you where before it was like really just show me the hard evidence that this works, and over time and practice have realized that that's obviously not everything and evidence needs to come from somewhere. So trying different things and using your expertise. I'd actually like to hear a little more on that too, like their explanation of the difference between your experience and your expertise.
I think what they were saying, and again, I gotta really want to call it out, but I don't want to have that storm. It was very critical of everything. So like expertise to me is, you're dedicated to your craft. Like if you're gonna put it, the 10,000 hour rule, whether you agree with it or not, in terms of becoming like really good at something. Well, you can't just go and do 10,000 hours of something without any like real dedication behind it and become an expert. It has to be dedicated practice for 10,000 hours. And I think that's what their argument was with, expertise versus just experience. Because, you could be in whatever medical field for 20 years, but if you don't critically think on a daily basis or, do this stuff, sure, you've got experience, but are you truly an expert in it? Their argument was no, and I would agree with that, is that unless you're critically trying to get better with everything on a daily basis, and challenging yourself, that's where the expertise actually comes in and like reflecting, on what works and what doesn't work.
Which is interesting, right? Because when you think about that, like someone that's striving to continue to learn more, expose themselves to more, and like intentional practice, right? So 10,000 hours of intentional practice.
Yes.
That person usually doesn't even call themselves an expert, really. So a lot of times your true experts wouldn't even define themselves as experts, whereas your experience will very quickly define themselves as experts. So yeah, that makes sense.
Do a good job.
The basics, just
Yeah.
do a good job.
I fall along the same lines of you guys. Of always before I felt like the hard evidence, and it had to be by the book of that's gold, and everything else is just kind of like voodoo or whatever. It doesn't work, but obviously I don't know. There's things that have been around for quite a while, and there's really not a whole lot of hard evidence for that. And
A lot of Eastern stuff.
yeah, it's still around. It's been around for probably a lot longer than a lot of the other things, and it must work or it wouldn't be around. And whether it's placebo or something else, it works. So it's hard to knock it. And I'm not saying that there's no value in evidence, because I think it always needs to come back to that. And maybe you have, try to push the fringes of finding what is going to be new or improved for what the standard of care is now. But then, okay, let's take that and then see if we can find some research to like go along with that, to maybe prove that, or say maybe it's not this aspect but another aspect, or what portions of that are beneficial.
And I thought, that was in something interesting they talked about too, is, the research field is insert number of decades behind.
10 at least, minimum.
10 years
Or 10 years,
decades.
10 years. 10
Yeah.
years.
But yeah, 10 years, and I've heard different arguments on that, especially in the medical field. Like, it's until the last batch of doctors every 25 to 30 years retires that things can actually start changing, because that's who holds all the power.
I've heard up to
Yeah.
30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Matthews says, she just said it again this week, and it's freaking hilarious. She said research advances or science advances one funeral at a time. Kind of true.
It is.
And so, even these guys referenced it. And so that's where I kind of go back. It's like, okay, so if we're completely evidence-based, some of this stuff hasn't been around or been popular enough. And we could also dive into, is research truly a good space anymore? Because everybody's trying to get something that's new out there. Because if you don't, you're not going to get published. You're not going to get tenure. Like, there's very few studies where they just will redo or try and copy another one, because there's no money in that. There's no fame in it. So you're always trying to find something, and how many people have skewed their numbers in order to get out there. So how good is the evidence, even if it's double blinded and this, that, and the other thing? Not hating on it, still think it's great, still think we need to do it, but it's its own gigantic nightmare of stuff.
It's kind of a big game.
Right.
Yeah. And I doing a little bit of reading too, and it talked about the group think, where maybe you have some study that gets a certain finding, and then like you talked about, the other studies try to piggyback off that and try to get that published research out there. Well, maybe that first study was flawed slightly, or not run the greatest, and now you have all these other studies that are referencing that or building off of that. So it's kind of almost like building a house of cards, where what are you building off of in the first place, and I think that's not all the time, like you said, not trying to knock it at all, but I do think that is prevalent. It happens.
I totally had a thing, but I completely lost it now.
The other thing to be weary of, I think, is just within the research is the conflicts of interest with
Definitely
where that research is coming from or who is going to benefit from it. And, if there's a financial bias, because obviously it's not cheap to run a study, and usually the better studies need to take a little bit more expense to run them. So those financial ties, I don't think guarantee the bias, but you still have to be wary of that. It's going to be more likely that there is a bias, so at least knowing what that is, and then just taking it with a grain of salt, I guess.
I know a certain friend, just people that we know, ran a study, presented the results back. It was for a company. The company wasn't real happy with what the results showed, so he was back to his stats to look for any other thing that might somehow work. He wasn't trying to doctor him. He wasn't trying to mess with them, but you're going back and you're combing through the numbers to try and find anything that gives a subtle hint, and then how much of a difference is it?
Well, and then your graphics can make things look so different, just like percentages on a graph and things. For someone that doesn't know exactly what they need to nitpick through the research, to find actual answers. Like in a bias study, like you're talking about, or the potential for bias, you can use the graph to make it look basically however you want with the results. Yeah.
So the other one I kind of struggle with this is, kind of it seems like extremism, and I don't know if that's a product of like insta fame. Everybody's
Okay.
got to put something on both ends. Some
Right.
are tried and true and hardcore and everything like that, or like if you don't buy into like your one thing that you're selling. And I know we've had this conversation a lot, and I've said it to a bunch of people, and why I like working with you guys is it's not just the chiropractic adjustment as it is with some other ones. My first experience with a chiropractor working with one was TJ, who you had met when we interviewed.
Yep.
Big ART guy. That's his thing, but it's soft tissue followed up by the adjustments. Doesn't do a ton of rehab on the backside of it. He'd prefer that out to somebody. It just wasn't his interest. Totally fine with that, but it wasn't just come in, spend all weekend with our track team and adjust them and say, oh, you're off on your way.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wasn't above, we had a massage therapist come and say, hey, you got to go see him. He's going to be the guy that's going to help you out. And our massage therapist would do the exact same thing. And I just sat there and coordinated because they both were better at it than I am. Totally fine by me. But just, I don't know if a jack of all trades is a good thing. I'd like to think it's okay. I know some people will say you got to specialize in something, especially if you're going to, business-wise or different things like that. And that's one reason I like Ferris, because he will talk about how being a jack of all trades isn't always the worst thing in the world. But it's just like, it seems like you almost have to have that toolbox.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to keep trying to hit everything with a hammer, even if it's not going to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
Or knowing the right tool to refer to.
Pull out, yeah.
Right. Yeah, having your
If you
people.
don't have it in your box, like you just said, those guys will refer back and forth. Know someone that does.
Yep.
It's always interesting when you get done with a seminar and like all patients that next week
Right.
fit right into that category.
That was my ART, Lahore. I came back, fixed my whole injury report. Life's going to be good. No, not a freaking chance. So
You
far
tried,
from the
damn
truth.
it.
I
You
did.
tried.
Yeah, at the BirthFit Professional Seminar, one of our first slides when we get into like why we're all here in this room is we all come from different blueprints. We all have different tools in our toolbox, but we need to be able to utilize them when appropriate. And I think, like the ability to know when you do need to refer to someone that you're beyond helping, or just even someone that is better or more of an expert in a certain area than you are. And when you talk chiropractic, you get extremes in any profession, but with chiropractics, like you have chiropractors that just strictly adjust, just strictly adjust one segment, and then all the way into like don't adjust at all. And I think
sent a person, the activator. That's all they did.
Oh,
that was it.
And I think like the biggest thing is that I've come to respect and realize that if that's where you are, is you're not doing more than adjusting, you're adjusting, then have someone else on your team that's doing more than that, or whether they're in your office or not, have that referral. Same thing for a PT or a chiro that's not doing adjustments. And that's just obviously an easy example for me to use because I'm in it. But I'm sure it happens, like I said, in every profession across the board.
Yeah, I think so. The thing you mentioned initially with the snake oil, we kind of talked about, being leery of the research side of things, which, there's your conflicts of interest. A lot of times that's not disclosed, or you said, you've got a study that maybe details are not brought to light as much as maybe they should have been, just because it doesn't benefit who they want it to benefit or whatnot. But then you look at the other side of that, and you said, finding that middle ground and don't going, being at that extremism. There's a lot of stuff out there promoting this is the best new thing, and I think you definitely have to be weary of that too. I mean, open to, willingness to, kind of look at this information and hear it out, but not just buying into it right away. Like,
Right.
this is it. Like, okay, well, sure, let's hear this out, but let's see the proof, whether it's a hard study or maybe it has to start with some case studies, which I'm sure they're going to have plenty of case studies to demonstrate with it too. But
Level 5 evidence.
yeah,
Pretty
there you
low.
go. Yeah.
Pretty low. You can move up one if you go to the case series.
But yeah, I think it's just, like you said, just finding that middle ground, because I don't know, both are prevalent, especially I think on social media and just to the general consumer. There's a lot more of that, the snake oil side of things, than the,
So like when
research
you
side of
say
things.
snake oil, it's more of a like gimmicky.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, and I think it was Charles Poliquin, big time strength coach, kind of little, very unique guy. We'll say it that way. And his whole thing is nothing's new in all of this. Like, there's very little that is new unless it's like cutting edge medical, lab type stuff. But in terms of like the performance and things, it's all just how people package it. Like, that's the difference in it. So are you actually presenting something new, or did you just find a way to tweak it? Kind of going back to all this, this guy was a former, that we've kind of referenced, was a former ART person. Well, a lot of what he was talking about sounded a lot like ART, but ART on its own, our friend, the massage guy, Kyle, goes, well, that's just pinning and stretching. That's a massage technique. Like, that's not new, but it got packaged in with a pretty bow on it, and they did a great job with it. Sure, but is it really truly something that's so different that it's what it is?
Right.
Sure. We don't sell a lot of things like that where we're running courses claiming we've created the newest and greatest thing. I don't know that you could.
Seems like a lot of times when that happens, there's just money that is
right.
The driving force.
Yeah. I mean,
that's hard on the nutrition. It's hard on the nutrition side. But I think that's also a point coming back to is like, I obviously don't own a business, you guys do, but I haven't seen anything that you guys have done where you're like, this is all that we believe in. Because you even say it, with like, the spine and body works, that could be so many different things, all with underneath that it's not like we're the instrument assisted specialists and that's, you come in with a cold and we're going to take a metal tool to you to fix you type of a thing like that. Because it is like, it's a broader picture than that, whereas some other ones, it's definitely not. It's straight up, this is what we do for absolutely everything.
I think the universe has a really, really unique way of humbling your ass if you think you know what you're doing too. Just from the standpoint of like, oh, we've got this, it's going well, we're helping people, it's good, I love my job. And then like you get that one patient that's just like, what the hell's going on? And I think, especially with the population that I work with, like the metaphysical or emotional component is freaking huge in their healing. And that's where you get into more of that like Eastern body side of things. But I would say straight out of school, I would have thought that was like hippy dippy and snake oil. But now seeing is like, holy shit. Yeah, you can't ignore that aspect of the human being. So it's more than like what's on their intake form and what can you do for them physically, but who they are as a person, where they are, back to kind of what we talked about in the beginning. One thing I was going to say too, with what you were just talking about with the snake oil and like being leery of sales gimmicky, I think it also comes into like, who do you get your information from, or who do you trust?
Right.
So in having the knowledge or confidence in them, I've gotten myself in this situation before. It's like, well, this person obviously knows what they're doing, so I'm just gonna take them for their word, not even look into it, and that bit me in the ass pretty damn hard. So even when you think you know, or you think someone else does, it's like, where is their information even coming from, and why are they so strongly confident about this?
That one, all I keep thinking is the nutrition side.
That's
With how much money is out there in the supplement thing, who's
mm-hmm.
these, wellness coaches and different things like that, and where's the backup on it?
It's hard too, because with the nutrition side, I don't think that you can pin this is the perfect diet for every single person either. There's so much variability, so it's very difficult. And I think most of the times when you hear that, like that nutrition, it's like just a blanket type thing of this is the greatest way to do it. Well, yeah, it's probably a great way to do it, maybe for you and maybe for a lot of other people, but probably not for every single person.
Right.
Like the difference in not only what you're eating, but who you are as an eater. And Mel with BirthFit talks, I mean, she's got extensive training in it, and she talks a lot about that, but we're all afraid of, well, not all of us, but that whole emotional eating.
Mm-hmm.
But we're all emotional eaters, so it's just more about like developing that positive relationship. But nutrition, I would say nutrition, I agree. Nutrition's a hard one to not get caught up in the gimmicks for people that are vulnerable and looking for help and desperate. And
yeah, very desperate.
I won't name the company, but we ordered a supplement from this company, and for our kids it was just like this nutritional whatever, and I looked at the back of it just to see what the ingredients were because of the previous incident I had just told you about, and I was like, what the, it's this, literally, I can't even remember what it's called, something nutrition something, and like one of the first ingredients is is it rice flour, and then like corn syrup solids, and I was like, what the? And this is a company that I had trusted before.
Interesting.
But that alone, I'm like, okay, what are you doing else? Like, what else is going on? So keeps us on our toes.
I had known it, but never realized it till Kelly did the whole 30. I just kind of played along for as much as I could, and just like her looking at everything and pointing out, and it's just like nothing is without some sort of chemistry experiment in it, which is hard. But it was just like
description.
You know how hard it is to find good bacon?
Oh my God, yeah. I couldn't buy bacon. Well, right now I'm only eating bacon that has honey in it, like no sugar at all.
Okay.
And so I couldn't buy any at the store because there's literally one kind at the store that's uncured and has honey in it rather than sugar, and they're out of it. And I was like, I mean, if you walk into the store and you look at the bacon section, you've got shit tons of options, but they're all crap.
She found it at the Natural Grocer in Rochester.
Got to go there.
Yep, it's a nice place, but Whole30 approved, but sometimes it's not there.
Right.
It is very good bacon. I will give it that. I believe we don't like to go back anymore because it's really that good. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard.
This is super hard.
Where else do we want to go with this?
Well, Erica was talking a little bit about, the humble pie piece of things, and I've been served that plenty of times. But with practice, I joke with patients now is like, you wouldn't have wanted to see me, when I first got out of school I feel bad now for how I treated patients. Right, not like, just like the things I did is like, God, man, what was I thinking? And you want to go back but you do the best that you can at the time. And for the way that I treat patients this week, in 10 years, I'll probably look back, and I hope that I look back and be like, what the hell were you doing? Like that was way off.
So much more to add or so much.
Yeah, you just do the best with what you can with the information that you have. But again, you have to look at the evidence and look at the research, but look at where that's coming from, and don't just buy into every single thing. Just do your homework.
For just to tie it back to people that potentially are listening to it, and honestly, I don't even know who our audience is, if it's more, practitioners, or if it's, patients or, clients, like knowing that by asking or talking to whoever your provider is, what do you do to continue to learn?
Yeah.
You know, is it I'm going to go online and get whatever continuing education units I need just to make sure that I maintain my, certification, my license up, or are you going out and challenging yourself with something new? And I want to go to a kinesiology taping course because I want to just sit there and drink the Kool-Aid for the weekend. I don't know that it'll ever change my opinion on it, but I want to go in with an open mind because obviously it's been around. They're successful. I'm not doing it because I see it on the Olympics. Just like I had done cupping before cupping was the thing.
Like
on
the Michael
Olympics.
Phelps craze.
Right. When I was over in India, they referenced that too.
Did they?
All because of Michael Phelps.
That's hilarious.
Cupping became a much bigger thing because of Michael Phelps. Well, even all our football guys are all interested in dry needling because James Harrison, who plays for the Patriots now, posted a picture and he had like 40 of them in him, just like all over his body. And now all of a sudden, what is it? What does it do? It's just like, calm down.
Yeah.
You're not James Harrison. But, like, I think that's big to just know what your people are going, what are they doing to continue to advance their knowledge. So, like, your patients would come in, what's your next thing that you're looking for?
I think that's a huge point on multiple levels because the patient needs to be able to have those types of conversations as it is. Like,
right.
Us as practitioners need to create that space within our office, and hopefully our informed consent is more than a sheet of paper, but like truly explaining to them the what and why behind what we're doing. And, then there is a little bit of responsibility though as a patient, and that goes for me or anybody, that if you're not seeing the results that you hope to see, then ask the questions or make the change or whatever. So yeah, I think that's for us on our side, and then for the patient as well. So that's a good point.
One, just kind of asking, we can kind of go around it. Like, how do you guys fit research into what you guys do? Like, again, we kind of referenced, I don't remember if it was on record or not, but, you were reaching out, asking for certain papers. I haven't done a ton of searching for, like, DNS related ones, other than obviously the couple that have been out there that have been really interesting. I found a couple other ones. I just haven't had a chance to read them.
Yeah.
So how do you guys put it in, especially kind of with what you do with BirthFit and the whole group does with BirthFit?
Yeah.
Because if you were on this other podcast, it'd be like, well, what's your evidence? Why does that work?
Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really... You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
It's a later, else I'd try and play devil's advocate, but like I don't want to make anybody angry at 9:30 at night.
No, that's a good question, and especially with the BirthFit population, like we get into, so my niche within that is core and pelvic floor, and it's like, holy gimmicky bullshit. If you want to go online and find some gimmicks, there's where you can find them. But relating it back to like, this is how we were born to move, so this is why we use that. The functional progression that is in all of the BirthFit training was developed in our office based on a patient that needed help, off from, like you said, nothing's new. It's based off of DNS or rehab prog school methods, and just put into a sequence for a specific reason. And that is an area where I've got a meeting later this week to try to do more research, because I do, I've seen it with, for several years now with patients and within our own office, and how it's helping. But I think that's where it's like, okay, we've got to put this out there and like do some research to make sure that things are activating properly, and like this is potential to last long term. But at the same time, because there's not any specific evidence out there with the functional progressions in the sequence that they're in for that population, doesn't mean I'm gonna like, well, sorry, we can't do this until I've got the evidence. DNS itself has a ton of evidence supporting it, and more coming out. On their, it's rehabps.com. They have a evidence page, and you can go through all their case studies and all their, there's a top few that I like to share with professionals to understand like why it's important for athletics and like just movement in general, but there's a lot on there. But I think honestly, what I do a lot outside of adjusting as a chiropractor is DNS. And from what I gather, from what I've been over there and talked to them, is they weren't an extremely research based methodology. It was more once they started spreading their courses and their methods that other people were kind of asking for the research, and they realized then, like, okay, we've got to culminate the two, the experience and the research.
Right.
And now they've been great with it. But yeah, I would say with my population too, it's difficult because everybody's afraid to do any sort of research on pregnant women. It's like a fear-based thing. So
It's tough.
that's a whole nother episode.
I think it's good too, because you can't literally be able to treat patients on a full-time basis and be able to read every single journal and every single article
Right.
within the journals. So if you can find like a reputable source, maybe like you talked about going to these different seminars, where you're continuing ed, you find a source or multiple sources of maybe instructors or people that you read or blogs that you follow or like different avenues that you're getting this information, or even books that you can follow them, and they're basing their information off of this research. So they're able to kind of find the evidence within their niche and then present this information and say, I just sent, I think both of you guys, I think I sent you the whole thing and you part of it, of that article today.
I saw them come through. I haven't looked at the emails yet.
So basically just an article though, and it kind of broke it down, and it was an article and it had like, I don't know how many different references, but then the articles within that. So it's pulling evidence, but it's kind of more concise within that specific topic specifically, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to do it too. Like any of these, the DNS courses more now, or like a motion palpation seminar. We went to a lot of those, like with Brett Winchester. I mean, he's always throwing in like, this is the latest research that they found regarding this specific topic. And I think it's nice to kind of get it that way too, as opposed to, trying to overwhelm yourself with everything.
I think
that's
it's
out
good
there.
too to like just do some PubMed or just like just once in a while just to
For sure.
search it and see what comes up, and I'll do that. I'll do that once in a while, and usually it gets me on a whole different sidetrack because then you find
Rabbit holes.
Yeah, you're finding stuff
Absolutely.
within stuff, and we talk about in BirthFit, like right now, basically, BirthFit's been started for, well, several years. 7th year. This is the 7th year of it,
Wow.
which is crazy. But it is a case study in and of itself, and
Mhm.
we're seeing better outcomes in birth and like shorter labors and all of that. And like, so we track within all of the regional directors track within a Excel sheet, and they can't without permission give patient like name or information, but we track results from
Right.
like,
That's
you
huge.
know, were they seeing a chiropractor? Were they training for birth with fitness and mindset? Like what was that, and like how's it going? So holding yourself accountable as a professional to like pay attention to what's going on in your clinic too.
Absolutely.
Are you getting good results or are you not? Type of thing. But off of what Kyle said, even just looking at like your mentor, where they get their information from, but then even like picking articles or studies out of bigger studies that you're seeing and going back into further of like, where did this come from or where did this originate too?
I think it's stolen from Ty Lopez. I don't know if you've ever seen him floating around on the interwebs, but he was talking about like, how you become an expert and like all the different things with that. And one of his things was you got to constantly be trying to prove yourself wrong. And so if you can legitimately look at what you're doing and go back and argue on the other side of that and continuously come back to your answer, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah.
If you're really trying to do it, and and I keep referencing this dry needling course, but I was just really impressed with the guy that was teaching it, because he presents some of the evidence that's out there. This is where he based all his ideas off of, and he's been doing it for 20 plus years. So there's a lot of clinical experience with it. But to be able to go and you're teaching a dry needling course and show a study where they found that you could do a sham that felt like a dry needle by twirling a toothpick, apparently. They've researched that, and it showed that it was comparable versus just straight soft tissue work. There was no significant difference in outcomes. Now, this is a guy that's trying to teach you how to dry needle and saying that in his clinic, unless he knows or it's a specific case where he thinks he needs to start right away doing that, he's going to go and have him do soft tissue work. He's going to put him with a massage therapist or somebody else that's better at it than him. That'll be step one.
It's like least to most invasive type thing.
Kind of a deal, unless he was just dead set positive that it needs to happen right now because this is what's going to resolve it, or whatever it may be. And I just thought that was huge, that somebody that is successful on multiple levels would readily admit that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's the type of person you want to go to, and the type of person you want to learn from.
Right.
Either way, yeah. Yep. That's a good point.
Yep. Yeah, I guess some of that was the other one. Just the question I kept having every time I was listening to some of these episodes, and when I wasn't yelling at the dashboard of my truck as I was listening to them, is, if none of this, see, I've never gotten more frustrated. It's been, short of like watching Food Inc. or whatever it was, or Fed Up, I think was Fed Up, where I was just like, oh my God. If it's not found in evidence and it hasn't been shown to work, and create actual tissue changes, yada, 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 so on and so forth, like, how do we explain the changes? How do we explain somebody feeling better? Is it completely mind screw, for keeping it relatively PG? We'll keep one of the 4-letter words out. Are you just fooling the nervous system? Can you truly go in, like, you can, again, go back to dry needling, and I was telling you about the trigger point thing I put up as just a pondering thing, and we had 4 or 5 people just have an absolute response that it was the most asinine thing they had ever heard in their life. To one point, somebody was like, well, we're just supposed to lay around and be sedentary our whole lives and not actually move for fear of trigger points. And it's like, well, you probably are taking it to just a little bit of an extreme, but if you go and you get one to release.
But like you said, something to ponder. I mean, let's think about that.
I don't know. Is it all just Jedi mind tricks that we're pulling out and it happened to work, or where are we at here?
Yeah, it's hard to, I think, sometimes figure out exactly what it is that is exactly causing that change too, because with some of these interventions, it's so multifactorial. Sometimes to go hard evidence in the research, it's almost impossible to run a study. What?
It's a background story. You're good. Sorry.
I'm curious because you've been smiling over there for the last...
No. It's nothing to do with this at all.
Oh, okay.
Just something he said triggered. Sorry.
I have no idea either.
I completely digress.
But it's just hard to control all the variables, I feel like, with the research.
I think, too, that, and this is where before we would say, like, the hippy-dippy bullshit, or, like, people might think it's wacky, but you can't underestimate the power of conversation and connection and, like, the power of touch and energy at all. So I think that's in our country where we miss.
For sure.
There's a huge gap in that. And, like, I have patients that sometimes they come in, it's like, Jesus balls, I just need you to fucking meditate for 10 minutes and then come back next week, because this is all, and, like, even back to trigger points, Collage with DNS talks about how, like, that's a brain issue. Your trigger points occur in your brain, not in your body. That's just retraining.
Where it manifests.
Yeah. So,
I was talking about the fascial system almost being like another nervous system. Like they've
right.
gotten down to where they're finding like electrical activity is just very like low threshold.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And so it's almost acts like the second nervous system or the more
Yeah.
intricate. Not that the nervous system isn't, but
I honestly think that we don't even know even close to as much as we have potential of knowing about the human body and dynamics, and everything is everything.
Like you said, the energy side of things, like sure you can measure energy to some degree, a little bit objectively, but we don't, like you said, we don't understand it. And how really can you right now for what we know? Yeah, we don't know what we don't know. It really is.
Right. And I mean, we're trained from a very young age to become disconnected from our intuition and all that. So then it's like, here we are. How do we explain things? Well, it's definitely, I think, multifactorial, but I think there's a whole nother component that is just really underaddressed.
Shit's getting deep now.
oh yeah.
So what makes a
Oh my
live
gosh.
body
Here we go.
different from a dead body is the energy. How do you
Got
measure
deep
that?
really fast.
And what happens?
You
What
guys are so
happens?
far
What
outside of
happens?
my world right now.
That shit just got deep.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, God.
Kyle, the hippity dippity.
Right?
That was a funny thing because the guy, then he's actually, somehow he's like an acupuncturist because that allows him to do the needlework in
Oh, yeah.
Indiana. I think
Wisconsin's
technically.
like that too.
Right. And so he's like, he classifies his acupuncture as not Eastern medicine. He does biomedical acupuncture. So it's more targeted. It's just how he refers to
Okay.
it. Like he doesn't pretend to be, someone. We
Like
had actually
Chinese medicine.
Right, we had a lady in the course that had gone over to China for 2+ years and trained to be a traditional acupuncturist. And he goes, pretty much the only one that I'll do, and it was on the pinky toe, is to deal with a breached baby.
Mm.
And he goes, I can't explain it, never will be able to. Works 80% of the time.
Wow.
Put a 1-inch needle in there, things happen, not sure why.
I'll have to
But
try that.
somebody-
I'll
Incredible.
have to try that out tomorrow.
But-
Joking.
Somebody figured that out somehow,
Exactly,
some
yeah.
way, but what evidence is for that? 80% is hard to argue with. I don't know, there's a lot of treatments that are going to get you 80%.
Even if you can't explain the mechanism, if
Right.
it works, it works.
That's like, I mean, the Webster certification with chiropractic is 80% accurate for helping create optimal space for baby to find optimal position, because we don't move babies. But I went to that I went to that course in October thinking like, I'm a perfectly good adjuster, like I don't really need to be certified in this. Is it just more letters? And that next week I had a 38-week pregnant woman that came in with a breech baby, and one time of Webster and the baby rotated and head down. I was like, there's your sign. But yeah, I mean, like somebody figured this shit out, and that number is hard.
Right.
It's really hard to argue. But they had to start somewhere, and then they had to do their research in order for us to know the number 80% is out there. So
Well, it's just some of those, like, how do you double blind some of this?
right.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I just don't, like, sure, that is the randomized control trial is your best evidence out there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? And then I don't pretend to, because I'm not a researcher and I was going to go back and I just ran out of time. Like how many double blind exercise ones are out there? Like what's your double blind? Just the different types of exercise? The people don't know which one is the intervention and which one isn't, but and I'm not sure. But it's just like, how can we get so caught up in that ish? Like kind of bringing it back around, but. Again, and we talked about it. The one guy is from what you said is more of a traditional, old school, tried and true chiropractic school. I don't remember the name, but we don't need to necessarily reference it. And I'm not bashing chiropractors, and because I'm not trying to bash anybody's thing, but chiropractic hasn't always been looked down as something that's not voodoo-ish kind of stuff for the longest time. On the fringe and the stigma that you guys have to fight with that. And so you're also coming out of a specific type of fitness facility that maybe isn't always the most evidence-based. Not you guys, the other person. It's just kind of like, where's the hypocrisy here with it? Is there?
Mm-hmm.
Just gotta truth in the middle somewhere.
Right. And yet we're going to go and call everybody else out on what they do. That's where I struggle.
Yeah. That, the Brene Brown book she talked about.
Assuming the best?
Yeah, just, she said, do you think that everybody is genuinely doing the best that they can? And I think it's a great question, because I think in general people do try to do the best that they can given their circumstances and their situation, and just what they've gone through or where they're at, their viewpoint. I think that most people are, if not everybody. So
what if everybody loved their job?
Yeah,
how much more would we get done?
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's tough.
I agree. And sometimes that comes back on us too, to assume the best, and it's really, really hard sometimes. But knowing that underneath it all, we just talked about this past weekend at the coach developments weekend too. But like underneath it all, there is love in what people are doing. You don't know where they came from or where they're going, but underneath it all, the good intentions are there. It can be hard to see it.
And I think that's part of what bothered me so much about this, and where, I think you got to have the hard conversations.
Oh, yeah.
But you got to do it in a way that's actually going to be beneficial.
Effective.
And I think, there's a lot of things in the supplement stuff that I don't agree with. I don't like how it's run. There's documentaries and all kinds of stuff on it. But I'm never going to fully bash someone if it's tied to something that makes sense. That you're not going to fix all your issues by taking this pill or powder until you correct these things in your lifestyle. Or, the same thing, like no one adjustment on upper cervical is going to fix everything necessarily. It potentially could, but like, can we not be so pigeonholed in what we think that we aren't open to any other idea with that?
There's a magic bullet for everything.
Right, because there isn't, or else everybody would be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If ART or insert whatever thing here cured every soft tissue thing ever.
We're too dynamic, or too dynamic as humans in order for that to be the case.
Too many variables.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I did go from 0 birds in the Muse Headband for an entire freaking month of meditation to 45 birds in the Muse Headband after getting my TL dry needled the other day, which was fucking crazy.
I don't know what that
backstory,
means.
Yeah, Joel.
Oh, do you know what the Muse Headband is?
Birds.
No. You're talking about birds, and
you gotta let
it
him
is 10 o'clock at night, and we did get fairly deep, so we're diving into some.
Okay, so the Muse Headband basically measures your brain waves. You wear the headband, and it measures your brain waves while you meditate. It's like the first of its kind. So we purchased one, and the first time I used it, I got 9 birds, and I was like, "Fuck yes, I'm awesome! I'm rocking this." And then, so my only New Year's resolution I set was to meditate every day all year long. So you would think that one would be getting better. Well, right. I was using the headband and getting so it gives you a bird. If you're in the state of calm, a bird will sound. Okay. And mine is set that if your mind is everywhere, that it plays a rainstorm. So I spent that first time half the time in calm, half the time in active or whatever. And then from then on, I was really, really little. There's calm, neutral, and active. So let me think. Tuesday, fast forward, I had been meditating for 2 months almost. So last Tuesday, I used the headband, got 0 birds, and spent 14 seconds in calm. The rest of it was inactive. Then Wednesday, I saw the PT because I'm having some gut issues and past scar tissue. So I went in for her to work on my scar tissue, and she's like, ask me all these things. She's like, I'm going to do your TL too because it seems like you're a little bit overstimulated. And usually
What's
that
TL for everybody?
thoracolumbar junction, so your
Okay.
mid-low back. Sorry.
You're good.
So
That's also confirming for me to make sure I knew what we were referencing.
yeah, so not exactly what I was expecting, and I can't describe. Like I felt so freaking good after that for the rest of the day, and then like the same time the following day, I used the headband, same exact spot, same time of day. Like the only thing that changed was that I had that done before, and just all the birds, like 45 birds, literally 45 birds in one session, and I spent 6 minutes in calm. And it wasn't until afterwards when I was like, holy shit, I wonder if she, thinking like back to her telling me that this would calm my system down, like maybe there's some stock in that.
You think like sympathetics or
yeah,
what?
yeah. That's what she was going to try to calm down my
Interesting.
sympathetics. So anyway,
It was interesting.
tangent. So look up the Muse headband, check it out.
Yep. Well,
I'll bring it down sometime.
For
You can
reference.
try it out.
I am gonna have 0.0 in calm.
Well, with that attitude, you will, Joel.
Right. I used to do that. Okay, we're so tangenting right now. I'm gonna have to cut all this out.
All the edits. You can cut the story out. It's
Right.
fine.
I still remember when I was younger, for whatever reason, I was like, can you ever get yourself to not think about anything? Like, is that feasible?
That's what people think
Like-
meditation is, right?
Like, can you just like get yourself to just go completely blank? And I would feel like at times you could like figure it out because you would just like almost overwhelm your system. But then you would sit there and be like, oh, I just thought about nothing. And then it's done. And I've never like revisited it because I haven't done any meditation stuff. I've thought about it. Dave Asprey had this thing where you like clip it on your ear and it measures like your heart rate variability and
Mhm.
basically turns like red if you're like starting to light up, even if you don't physically feel like you are. And then so you want to maintain green all day.
Gotcha.
He says it's great in like traffic because it really gives you a test of if you can keep yourself calm, basically.
Or at bedtime at the bowling house.
And I've thought about trying it just out of morbid curiosity to see if that's something you can like actually control. But I still remember trying to do something like that. Is could you actually like get your mind to be like calm and not think about anything? And I feel like there was like a split second where it was just like too much overload to the point there was nothing, and then you think that, oh, I was thinking nothing, and you're back to where you were.
We need to do another episode on what is meditation for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to contribute much to that, so I'll just sit and listen.
You can be the lab rat.
There we go. Anything else we want to touch on? I don't know that we need to go through all the questions, but
Yeah, I think we hit it.
some of the stuff, and I haven't read them, you know, when we look at like book recommendations and things like that, I think it's Bad Science is one that's out there that kind of gives you an idea of how to like dive into what's not good research. And that was one thing I did take away a little bit from listening to these episodes and different things, is that I was the guilty one that I would read the abstract, the intro, maybe a little bit of the methods if I had something that I wanted to know, or if they used an intervention I was curious about, but then would jump to the discussion, try and glean all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Where I still kind of do that, but based on what I'm seeing out of the abstract, I'm more critical. Just in terms of like being a little bit more, not that I'm going to bash, you know, the author or anything, but I'm just a little more aware, which I think is a good thing. That's something I gleaned out of all this, but I believe it's Bad Science. I really want to read that one. And then I think there's another one that's called Lying with Statistics that's supposed to be pretty interesting. That kind of gives you the background of like how that can happen and how they can just be like molded to fit the argument. And, you know, what does this actually mean? You know, oh, we found an effect, but it's not statistically significant, but somebody might see the effect and go, oh, well, it works. Well, it didn't mean that it worked better than anything else. It just happened to have an effect.
Mm-hmm.
The significant part is it, but then you'll see that if you don't read into it, they might not have done it at 95% confidence. It might have been done at 80. Not as good anymore, in theory. So,
yeah, that would be interesting. That book.
But yeah, other than that, not gonna lie, like the headsets, they do pretty good.
Yeah, you guys sound legit in here.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
We better for
Stepping up the game.
yeah.
Like it.
Well, we hope you got something out of that, if not a couple interesting stories late on a
You should have
Tuesday
some good
night
questions.
in February. So, shout out to Paragon. We missed that episode part. That might be a blooper for their supplement support and the different things. You can use our CP code CP15 at checkout, get 15% off. I don't know if they have any more of their catalysts, but hopefully they get that going soon. But they're well worth checking out. And until next time,
They've got other good products.
absolutely. I also utilize the Flame Off.
Flame off.
Yeah, I just popped my flame off before the episode, so.
I try and go at the beginning of the day, end of the day, just to see. It's more of an experimental phase right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, see, this past weekend didn't help, but that's all right. Anywho, we'll talk to everybody later.
All right.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Clinically Pressed. Go to clinicallypressed.com for full show notes and links to everything that we covered in this episode. While you're there, you'll have full access to all our episodes, insights, and shorts. You can find Clinically Pressed on YouTube or any podcast outlet that you use. If you could give us a rating, thumbs up, or a review on how we're doing, we would greatly appreciate it and heard it helps out quite a bit. To get more free content delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Total Athletic Therapy newsletter at totalathletictherapy.com or clinicallypressed.com. You'll get direct links to all the new Clinically Pressed episodes, reviews on some of the latest research in health and performance, and links to related podcasts and other items meant to help you make the complicated simple and optimize performance. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.